You're listening to the Cyberwire Network, powered by N2K.
Hey everybody, Dave here. Have you ever wondered where your personal information is lurking online? Like many of you, I was concerned about my data being sold by data brokers. So I decided to try Delete Me. I have to say, Delete Me is a game changer. Within days of signing up, they started removing my personal information from hundreds of data brokers. I finally have peace of mind knowing my data privacy is protected. Delete Me's team does all the work for you with detailed reports, so you know exactly what's been done. Take control of your data and keep your private life private by signing up for Delete Me. Now at a special discount for our listeners. Today, get 20% off your Delete Me plan when you go to joindeleteme.com/N2K and use promo code N2K at checkout. The only way to get 20% off is to go to joindeleteme.com/N2K and enter code N2K at checkout. That's joindeleteme.com/N2K, code N2K. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the CyberWire's Research Saturday. I'm Dave Bittner, and this is our weekly conversation with researchers and analysts tracking down the threats and vulnerabilities, solving some of the hard problems, and protecting ourselves in a rapidly evolving cyberspace. Thanks for joining us.
Well, so we're actively monitoring a lot of different threat actors and campaigns around the world, but we follow with special interest what's happening in Southeast Asia, and especially what's coming from Chinese actors.
Our guests today are Ismael Valenzuela, VP of Threat Research and Intelligence, and Jacob Ferris, Principal Threat Researcher from BlackBerry, discussing the team's work on LightSpy. APT-41 deploys advanced deep data framework in targeted Southern Asia espionage campaign. Well, let's dig into some of the details here. I mean, let me toss it over to you, Jacob. Can you sort of lay out what exactly we're talking about here in terms of the activity that you all are tracking?
Sure. So we were actually looking at the command and control infrastructure from LightSpy and WormSpy and noticed that there were different SSL certificates being hosted, which kind of implied different services being hosted. And then whenever we started investigating those IP addresses, we saw different URI structures being utilized that didn't point to WormSpy or LightSpy. And it turned out whenever we pulled the files down at those URI, they happened to be Windows binaries. And so once we started reverse engineering those, we discovered it was actually deep data and this whole other toolkit.
Well, let's go into some of the details here of the groups. I mean, starting out with the LightSpy malware campaign, what was their range of capabilities and who were they typically targeting?
LightSpy was first discovered in 2020 in Hong Kong, and a lot of the lures utilized by them were actually targeting the democratic protests in Hong Kong. So you're kind of looking at targeting of journalists and everyday citizens that aren't necessarily aligning with the CCP. So those capabilities were generally around finding rioters or individuals of interest in the populace. So you needed their direct location. You needed to be able to pull audio so you could figure out what they were talking about. They were also pulling any communication such as chat or email or passwords so you can get into their private accounts.
And so now, in addition to that, we're talking about deep data. So explain that to me.
So deep data is their Windows targeting. We saw all of the previous things that I mentioned on iOS and Android, and we've seen Mac OS versions come out, but and we've seen the infrastructure and hints pointing to Windows binaries out there, but we have not actually been able to decrypt those or see the internal workings of that until we found the deep data binaries. There are some interesting hints at Windows Phone because of the X509 certificates utilizing some of the plugins. So it's possible this historically was used to target Windows Phone users as well, though Windows Phone is now deprecated. So
Right. I was going to say,
yeah,
what? Windows Phone?
absolutely.
Take us back, right?
Very
So that also
precise.
tells us that this has probably been around for longer than what we have visibility into.
Ismail, you were saying?
No, I was going to say that very precise targeting, right? If anyone is still using Windows phones out there. But this is something that I usually say attackers are lazy, right? They're going to be reusing frameworks and code that work. Like, why would they rewrite something from scratch? And it's very interesting with this campaign. We have seen infiltration of messaging platforms like WhatsApp, Telegram, Signal, WeChat. But as Jake was mentioning, we still see some remnants of maybe some code that was previously there. So that's interesting.
It is. Explain to me, Jacob, the modularity of this. Why does that suit them particularly well when we're talking about an espionage campaign?
It changes what application they can use whenever they are targeting somebody, right? Like the scope of the intrusion and how much data they need to send to a victim before they can actually get the intended product out from them. So if they only want to listen to audio because they know that this person is not utilizing any of the chat functionality on this product, then they can only send the audio plugin. Also, development can be disparate, right? You only have to develop one thing really well before you can put it into production, as opposed to having to update the code for every section.
And I suppose there's some advantages of making whatever you're sending out to be comparatively lightweight.
Yes. I think more looking um, at the actual code and the strings involved, it looks more like it's modular because they're having different groups do the development. APT 41 and pretty much anybody that has been associated with the Ministry of State Security in China has regularly utilized universities to do a lot of the development. And the development here looks more like it's something structured and professionally done, such as by developers as opposed to necessarily malware authors like you would see out of Russia.
Now, talking about the plugins here, they are targeting specific messaging apps.
Yeah, like I do not have the list right in front of me, but they are targeting Signal, Feng Shui, QQ, primarily large groupings of Chinese messaging applications, but they've also started branching into U.S. applications, especially ones that are encrypted, right, or used for mass messaging like Telegram.
Telegram, WhatsApp, Signal. Yeah, email monitoring.
Yeah. Now, you were talking about tools that can be applied to Windows here. I mean, to what degree are they functioning in a cross-platform way, and are they integrating the way that they're able to communicate across those platforms?
Yes, so the command and control servers actually have a console that can be utilized by all of the different products, right? Like LightSpy, WormSpy, and Deep Data all upload their information to a console that is that's cross-platform. That way, whoever is operating the console can just click whichever users they want that are infected and go ahead and inspect that data that's been returned.
Can we talk some about the strategic objectives of APT-41 themselves? I mean, you mentioned them. The tools that you're seeing here in deep data, how does that reflect the folks that they're targeting?
Well, APT 41 historically has done both espionage and cybercrime. And since we've seen these tool sets being utilized on the general populace, it would be very advantageous for APT 41 to accomplish both of those tasks, or at least both of those goals with this tool set.
And it's worth mentioning, Dave, as well, that APT41 was indicted by the U.S. Department of Justice back in 2020. So there's a long record for this group in targeting these strategic objectives using, as we just see here, right, some advanced malware.
We'll be right back. And now, a message from our sponsor, Zscaler, the leader in cloud security. Enterprises have spent billions of dollars on firewalls and VPNs, yet breaches continue to rise by an 18% year-over-year increase in ransomware attacks and a $75 million record payout in 2024. These traditional security tools expand your attack surface with public-facing IPs that are exploited by bad actors more easily than ever with AI tools. It's time to rethink your security. Zscaler Zero Trust plus AI stops attackers by hiding your attack surface, making apps and IPs invisible, eliminating lateral movement, connecting users only to specific apps, not the entire network, continuously verifying every request based on identity and context, simplifying security management with AI-powered automation, and detecting threats using AI to analyze over 500 billion daily transactions. Hackers can't attack what they can't see. Protect your organization with Zscaler Zero Trust and AI. Learn more at zscaler.com/security. And now, a message from Black Cloak. Did you know the easiest way for cyber criminals to bypass your company's defenses is by targeting your executives and their families at home? Black Cloak's award-winning digital executive protection platform secures their personal devices, home networks, and connected lives. Because when executives are compromised at home, your company is at risk. In fact, over 1/3 of new members discover they've already been breached. Protect your executives and their families 24/7, 365 with Black Cloak. Learn more at blackcloak.io. And who do they seem to be targeting here? When we're talking about the specific industries or the entities that they seem to be going after here, what are you all seeing?
Well, as Jake was mentioning before, these groups are tied to the Chinese Ministry of State Security, and we know that the Chinese government is just conducting massive surveillance, right? So, sometimes we see them targeting government interests, other times like healthcare, education, telecommunications, technology. So they keep, changing maybe their targets, but at the end of the day, what they're just trying to gather is as much information as possible.
Jacob, how do you rate the sophistication of this group when you look at their work, the things that they're making here?
So I have different opinions on the quality of code levels, but I think the more sophisticated point around this and why it is actually a high level of sophistication is because of the breadth of capacity. Right, they're able to target multiple operating systems, both mobile and desktop devices. Plus, they're able to target routers, and we've seen utilization of zero-day exploits for the delivery of these things in the past. There are not many groups that are doing that, and then to see the infrastructure stay online for years and years and years. Right, we saw the IP address that was used to identify the LightSpy group as APT41 is an IP address that's been used since 2014.
And something we didn't mention, we talked about some of the plugins, but I was just thinking there's also one plugin to extract passwords from KeePass, right? Maybe many in the audience recognize KeePass as a password manager. Like often we security experts would recommend people to use password managers. Well, guess what? Like they're using these plugins to extract the passwords and any of the information installed in these applications. Again, collecting more data, more passwords to get access to more platforms.
When you look at the modularity of this, I mean, getting back to what we were talking about, the comparative sophistication here, I'm curious, Jacob, when you look at these different modules, do you get a sense for these were probably put together by the same person or group, and this looks like a different cluster. These were the these are the lower level people in the organization, and these are the real coding masters here. Do those sorts of things come up when you're doing your own research?
Absolutely. You can find the debug paths inside of the binaries, and you can many times see the name of the individual that's working on it. You can tell whenever the project name has changed, or at least the project name that was given to these individuals has changed. And then you see those slight shifts over the years whenever you can check compilation times and then see how different people are working on the project over different time frames.
No, that's interesting. Well, what are your recommendations then? I mean, how do folks go about protecting themselves against this sort of thing?
Yeah, it's a pretty wide scope of targeting, right? Um, so I think the age old defense in depth with ISO 27001 is pretty much the only real solution there.
Are there any things in your research here that were particularly surprising that, made you sit up and go, that's interesting?
You know, I don't think so. Be- and I'll say it because it looks like they've written a lot of custom stealers that are similar to other stealers that are out there. Everybody's just re-implementing the same functionality, but so in a new way, so that it is not detectable by endpoint systems or network detection systems. And so, like, recently we saw that a Windows Stealer plugin has been added to the command and control commands. And well, this whole thing started out as a Windows Stealer, but now they have a command and control function just um, for that, right? So uh, none of the things being developed here are particularly unique.
I think one of the interesting things about these campaigns is that they're not just targeting maybe traditional platforms only, right? Like we talk here about Windows, but we have Jake has mentioned before some Android implants as well, and the targeting of specific communications or applications that we're supposed to usually consider as safe, right? Like WhatsApp or Signal, and this is a very interesting lesson learned, especially because they're targeting politicians, they're targeting journalists, people that have access to very sensitive information. It raises the question, like, should we be using those messaging platforms for secure communications? And I guess the answer is pretty obvious, right? Like, these platforms do not provide the type of security that is needed to maybe share corporate secrets or the type of highly confidential information.
Can we dig into that a little bit? Because you did catch my attention when you mentioned Signal on the list there. Because I think, like a lot of folks, I consider that when I think of secure messaging systems, that's certainly at or near the top of the list in terms of things that are readily available to folks, average people out there. How do they come at an app like Signal? What sort of things do they use?
Well, in many cases, and Jake, feel free to expand on this, but in many cases, the weakest point is the endpoint, right? As we said before, and many people install the client applications on their desktops that will communicate with the servers, and that could be the weakest point. In this case, we detail this in our blog. These plugins, these DLLs. Signal DLL and WhatsApp DLL that will be loaded when the plugin is running, and they will be used to get access to these data. So that could be one of the avenues. Many of these platforms as well, they encrypt end to end, right, with different keys that you could generate on the endpoint and keys that you have on the server using public key infrastructure, PKI. But if you're able to tap the device itself and get access to those keys, or tap even the memory of the device where maybe the data is not encrypted, you could get access to that type of information.
Jacob, anything to add there?
I don't think so. But it's like Ismail was saying, the way that the applications are actually pulling that data is by accessing the local databases, and the encryption keys are going to be stored on the device so that it can actually be decrypted at rest, right? Um, So then they're just pulling it directly from that database and decrypting it with the local encryption keys.
Right, right. At some point, somebody has to see it, right? So it has to become viewable, and that's your opportunity. Yeah. Well, when you look at a group like this that has a history and you see the kind of arc that they've been on, do you get a sense for where they're headed, for what sort of things are on their horizon?
Yeah, targeting the U.S. I mean, they've been pretty strongly targeting regions around China that are not supportive of the CCP. So we see C2 like command and control servers in Japan, Singapore, and Hong Kong, but those are also primarily U.S. sympathizing countries to some degree, and you I think Google put out a report last year stating that they saw 6 different U.S. government entities being targeted by APT 41. So it goes in line that anything that is uh, not directly supporting the socialist agenda is probably going to be targeted.
When we talk about persistent threats, right, this is clearly one of those. They're not going to go anywhere, and they're going to be expanding in capabilities and scope as time goes on. So whatever China has geopolitical interests, we're going to see these type of activities. As we said before, even with an indictment from the Department of Justice, ongoing FBI investigations, it's not stopping these groups. They're intensifying their espionage activities.
Our thanks to Ismael Valenzuela and Jacob Ferris from BlackBerry for joining us. The research is titled LightSpy. APT-41 deploys advanced deep data framework in targeted Southern Asia espionage campaign. We'll have a link in the show notes. That's Research Saturday, brought to you by N2K Cyberwire. We'd love to know what you think of this podcast. Your feedback ensures we deliver the insights that keep you a step ahead in the rapidly changing world of cybersecurity. If you like our show, please share a rating and review in your favorite podcast app. Please also fill out the survey in the show notes or send an email to cyberwire@n2k.com. We're privileged that N2K Cyberwire is part of the daily routine of the most influential leaders and operators in the public and private sector, from the Fortune 500 to many of the world's preeminent intelligence and law enforcement agencies. This episode was produced by Liz Stokes. We're mixed by Elliot Peltzman and Trey Hester. Our executive producer is Jennifer Iben. Our executive editor is Brandon Karpf. Simone Petrella is our president. Peter Kilpie is our publisher. And I'm Dave Bittner. Thanks for listening. We'll see you back here next time.